We are here for our June edition of NOYO Knowledge. We'd like to thank everybody who is watching this, hopefully in time. But if you're not and you're watching it later, thank you for viewing. We do appreciate it. Remember, you can check us out if you're watching right now through Facebook Live from our NOYO page on Facebook. Or you can join our Zoom chat, and if you look at the very bottom of the screen, there is a chat button in which you can type in questions in real time, and we will do our absolute best to answer them in real time. So feel free to do that. Yeah. Also, you can check out any of our past NOYO Knowledge sessions on YouTube, on our YouTube channel for NOYO, the Northern Ohio Youth Orchestra, or you can also go to our website and see our past NOYO Knowledge sessions there. And our website is www.noyo.org. That's www.noyo.org. And then lastly, if you go to our website, noyo.org, you'll see on your top right-hand screen a big red donate button. And for those of you who have already donated from our Toast to NOYO, thank you so very much. We can't thank you enough, and we do appreciate it. We couldn't do what we do without your generosity. So if you'd like to make a donation to NOYO, feel free to do so. Every little bit helps, especially during these times of uncertainty in music education. And so we greatly appreciate it. And the best part is, if you want to donate a whopping sum of money, you can, and stay anonymous. So you can be like a Superman out there. So, it's like donation by Clark Kent for, $5,000. We would love you forever, Clark Kent. So thank you so much. So with all that being said, I would like to welcome our very, very, very special guest today, Dr. Antoine Clark. He is our conductor of our top group at NOYO, which is the Philharmonia Orchestra. Welcome, Dr. Clark.
Hi, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yes.
So could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, besides like the fact that you are like the head honcho conductor of the Philharmonia Orchestra in NOYO?
Sure. So I'm originally from Virginia, outside of the capital, Richmond, probably an hour and a half. And I grew up in rural Virginia as a kid and started music in 6th grade. My father was a church musician, so I kind of grew up with gospel music and spirituals and rock music and blues in my household. But in 6th grade, I really got interested in the clarinet, and basically, did that from middle school to high school, and decided early on that I wanted to go to the route of being a musician and an educator. So in 1996, I graduated, and then I went on to Virginia Commonwealth University, majored in music education. After that, I went to the Cincinnati Conservatory in music for clarinet performance. After graduating CCM, I went for a brief time to Detroit, Michigan, where I played with a couple orchestras there and studied with the principal clarinetist of the Detroit Symphony. And then I moved back to Virginia to actually work as an educator. And I taught middle school band, choir, musical theater, general music. Many people probably know that a lot of times these jobs might require you to wear many hats, which is something I actually really enjoyed doing. And so after that experience, I moved to Ohio in 2005 to start my doctorate in clarinet performance. I took a position with Kenyon College as their adjunct woodwind instructor in 2007. I'm still there today. For 1 year, I did live in Nebraska, where I taught as a woodwinds professor and directed the school's orchestra. I moved back to Ohio and decided to continue my life as a clarinetist but I wanted to further develop my skills as a conductor. And so in 2013, I founded the McConnell Arts Center Chamber Orchestra, and went back to school to get another master's in conducting at Ohio State. And here we are today. I not only have the position with my chamber orchestra here in Columbus and NOYO, but I also direct the orchestras at Ohio Northern University and Ohio Wesleyan University. So that's a little bit about my career path.
Wonderful. Busy guy.
Yes.
To say the least. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today, which it sounds like you're overly prepared to give plenty of good information here, is preparing for a woodwind audition. We've had various NOYO talks in which we talk about preparing for a string audition or preparing for a brass audition. So this is going to be very woodwind centric, for all of our wind players, because I know even though you didn't share this, you play a lot of different woodwind instruments. So you are multi-versed. I have seen it in action. So we're going to be talking about what goes into woodwind auditions and the preparedness for that. And some of the questions I'm also going to be asking are from you as a clarinet and woodwind player from that perspective. And some of the questions are going to be from an adjudicator's or a teacher's perspective on those audition processes. So I'm going to get the ball rolling here and ask you, so what all went into the audition process for you as a clarinetist, since that's your main instrument, early on, and how did the process differ from audition to audition? So like what's some different stories that you can maybe share from like middle school auditions, high school auditions, any of those collegiate auditions that you've had?
Sure. So from 6th grade to now, I obviously have done auditions on different levels, whether it be for your high school ensemble, getting into a college music program. Once you're into that college music program, auditioning for the ensembles, music festivals, and then professional orchestral auditions, as well as clarinet professor jobs. So one thing I would always like to impress on any new student or students that I'm working with is that preparation for any audition happens months, and depending on what the level you are at, even years before that audition actually happens. So let me just start with that. Sometimes I hold about, let me say, I probably have about 30 to 40 students in my private studio at any time. But often I will get calls from a parent or from a student saying, hey, I have an audition that's next week or 2 weeks from now. And the first thing I always think is, well, one, I'm sure I can give you some advice. I'm sure I can give you some pointers and tips to improve the experience. But in the back of my mind I'm thinking I wish I had a year with you, okay? And so the reason I say that is because a lot of the times, the things that you are presenting in that audition it takes time to develop those skills. Now, some students may have the luxury of having a private teacher, and like me as a kid, I didn't actually have a private teacher until I was in the 11th grade. So, I come from this experience of being on both sides, having studied with someone and then having a time where it was kind of me on my own and a little bit of advice from my public school teacher. So I would just always say that the process of auditioning is really tied to your preparation. And it's sometimes very difficult to be successful if you're not honing those skills before. So with that being said, I would say the higher the level of the position or ensemble that I was seeking to obtain, the higher my proficiency had to be in terms of rhythm, intonation, articulation, tone, and musicality. And when I prepare my students, be it if they are in middle school and they may want to audition for, here in Columbus, we have an organization called Junior Wins for 8th graders and 9th graders. So let's say if I have a student preparing for that, or if they're trying to prepare for the top youth orchestra in town, or if they're applying for college, I really think about the level of the student, and I think about what the adjudicators are thinking about in that audition. Obviously, if someone's applying for a middle school position, we're not expecting them to play like a professional or to have certain skills down. But we are looking for is confidence in the individual. Always high on my list is a comfortableness with rhythm and keeping time. Because I really feel that if you have rhythm, that's a structure you can hang everything else on. It's like having a beautiful garment. It has the right colors, it has the right type of fabric, it might have bells and whistles, but if it's not constructed well, then the piece, the garment, can't be truly appreciated. So one thing I would tell young students and teachers is to really help develop that rhythmic integrity that gives the adjudicator the confidence that they can come into an ensemble and perform with others and not kind of be on their own. So it is never too early for students, and regardless what level they're applying for, middle school up to a professional job. Obviously, always listening to music is key, because that's how you learn the language that is the specific style of music that you're working in. I find that all too often students, they experience music in school, they experience, if they have a private teacher, they experience music with their private teacher, but they may not go the distance to play the literature that they are actually learning to play. And I always say to my students, how did you learn to speak English? And they'll say to me, well, I learned it from my parents. Right. Even before you could read, you learn how to do the skill. And music is the same way. You have to be immersed in it. You have to listen to it, even if you don't always understand everything that's going on in the music. And most people that go to classical concerts or any kind of concert, I don't care if it's jazz or pop or rock, you may not know all the terminology, but you respond to that. And you start to become acclimated to the language. So always listening to music. And then as you grow, maybe understanding how to read a score, knowing how the parts work. And I think we're going to get to something about active listening later. So I'll just leave that there. Another thing I would say, no matter what level you're going to apply for, is to play your audition pieces for others. Don't put yourself in a vacuum. One, it allows you to just get comfortable with playing for other people. If you just practice in your practice room, and if you have a teacher, you play for that teacher, it's not going to simulate the shock that could come from being in an audition experience. Because it's only natural to feel that someone's judging me, and therefore you're going to get nervous. So the more you can play for others and putting yourself in different environments, the easier it will be for you to feel good in that audition place. Another thing I would just say, what goes into an audition also determines depends on the format of that audition. Right now with COVID-19, some of my clarinet students are applying for the local youth orchestra here in Columbus, and they have to do their auditions through video rather than in person. So you'll also find that even in upper level jobs, or let's say music festival, sometimes if you apply for a big music festival, they may ask you to send in a tape or video rather than doing it in person just because of the logistics. When you have a video audition, I think it's even more imperative that you give your best result. Obviously, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And so you need to really think that when you produce this video, is this the best cumulative result from the scales to the excerpts to the solo piece that you can present? Because you have as many shots as possible to do that. I remember a clarinet teacher who taught at, one of my clarinet teachers who taught at a big time festival said to me, he said, I am a little bit more stringent with video auditions because you have multiple times to do it over and over to give me your best. And when you decide what is your best, that also shows the committee that while I'm not perfect, I didn't give up until I gave you the best result I can. And obviously, when you're doing these things in person, the preparation is therefore key to helping you be the best you can be on that day. And then another thing I would say that I love to do as I was preparing for any audition was to keep track of my progress through a diary. If I have a number of excerpts that I have to perform or a solo piece, I basically track, where I am in the process. Is it a new piece for me? Have I ever heard this excerpt? I take note of if it's something I know before, okay, where are my skill levels at with this piece already? If it's a certain tempo marking that I need to reach, then I track daily throughout the weeks. How am I progressing to that? And I'm listening to myself practicing. Another thing you should do is always tape yourself. Listen to recordings of yourself, because it's a totally different experience than what you think you're doing when you have the instrument in your mouth or in your hands. You have to kind of put yourself outside of the experience and listen more objectively. So those are just some broad things that I kind of think of when I think of just performing for an audition in general, no matter what the level is.
Yeah, I know. I know it was a broad question, so I expected a lot of slices of that pie, So
Yes.
no, but I think all those are really good things, and I completely agree with you in that preparation is key. So the lower level you are, middle school, just starting out with auditions, things like that, you need to prepare as best you can, but you don't need to live with it and prepare for a year because you might not have been playing for a year, But as you get older and those auditions become, more intricate, the more preparation is needed well ahead of time. I think that is a very, very good key advice on that. And I second that completely from just my own experiences. So, so what advice did your specific teachers, because you said you didn't start taking lessons to the 11th grade, which, that's just amazing. I would have thought like maybe you started at like, 9 or 10 years old or something, But so what advice did your school teachers and your private instructors, once you started taking private lessons, give you to prepare for auditions?
Right. So some of my earliest experiences with auditioning would have been for district band, or in Richmond, Virginia, we had a program called the Greater Richmond Youth Wind Ensemble. So that was another early audition. And I can tell you, it's been so long ago that I'm not sure what any of my teachers said, but during that period. But I would think that the biggest thing is just, try to do as well as you can, preparing, know your scales from memory. As I got to college, I remember my clarinet professor, we were preparing for my master's auditions. And he had said to me in one lesson, he was like, look, Antoine, I've given you, I believe, all the tools that I can. And I've given you the chance. I've taught you as much as I know. And now you got to kind of let that marinate. And he said, for him, it was a point where after we worked on the audition, he kind of backed away a little bit and let me just kind of like just absorb everything. So I kind of use that in my process with teaching, with my students, I should say, as we are preparing for auditions, maybe not a week or so, but a few days before that audition, I really try to step back to allow the student just to have the chance to let everything marinate in their mind and not overwhelm them. So I guess I'm approaching this question a little bit as a teacher from my experience as a student on that aspect about just letting the student breathe and not overwhelming them as you get close to the audition. But I guess one of the things that stuck with me when I started applying for auditions that were for orchestral jobs and dealing with orchestral excerpts was the advice to know the score. You really need to know that you're not in a vacuum when you're auditioning. As you're sitting in that chair playing, you really almost have to imagine the sounds that are in the score, that's in the music or around you while you're performing, because that can help dictate how you phrase music, even down to how you count. Currently, some of my students are working on a Beethoven excerpt, and often if they trip up on anything, it's not the notes, but it's the counting of the rest. So if you know the score and you know what other instruments have, that voice from those other instruments can kind of help you sing through the music. Because when it comes down to it, as players, the instrument is allowing us to sing from the internal. The music is here, and the instrument is just a tool to help us sing. So if you can't sing if you don't know what's going on in your own part and what other people have around you. So that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned as, be it even just a solo, know the orchestral score or know the piano reduction, and be invested in that music making. If you're auditioning with a pianist and accompanist, you need to also show that you are responding to that music making, and that it's not just about, oh, I'm playing a solo. So those things in tandem. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken away from my teachers when it came to auditioning.
No, I think that's fantastic advice, because rather than just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, instead of just counting those rests like that, there's something that's meant to be going on, and that's, I think, part of looking at music from a 3D approach. It's not just right notes, right rhythms, good tone. It's getting deeper into the music. What's going on when you have those rests? What is that other voice that's singing? What other, is it a French horn, section? Is it a flute section? Is it like a percussion thing? So yeah, I agree. And I think that's fantastic advice to get deeper in the music. So yeah, that's something good. That's the very first time that I think we've heard that for how to prepare for an audition. So that's really good new advice for our kiddos. So what kind of practice strategies did you use to prepare for collegiate auditions when you were in high school? So that first collegiate audition, besides, I guess, just preparing well in advance that you've already mentioned.
For me, I only auditioned for one college as a student going into my undergrad, but I took the effort to meet my teacher before I had an audition. And I took the effort to at least get to know about him and what he saw in a player. I guess my advice to any students looking to go to college, and right now I can't believe it, I think I have like 2 students in my studio who wants to major in music, and this is becoming, happily, I'm happy to say this is becoming a regular thing. I'm at least getting 1 to 2 students a year that go off into music. But I always encourage the students, first, it's a big world out there, and music is very competitive, like many other things. And a lot of times, it's not always about your playing when you audition, okay? Obviously, you have to give a good audition, but you could have 2 people who are just as fantastic, but the teacher may have more confidence in wanting to accept another student because he knows that student's personality and how he or she may work with him. So I say during the summer, try to first know what kind of teacher you want to work with, do research, look up the professionals in the business, and then try to see if they are doing workshops or festivals that will inform you of the teacher's teaching style, as well as allow the teacher to get to know you better. So I tell my students, okay, I can help you, but we need to write a letter to this teacher, tell them of your interest, ask about where they're teaching, and let's see if you can meet them beforehand. Okay, so yeah, and I guess, and I already said this, but that if you know particularly what the teacher is looking for, that can help. So for me, growing up, meeting my first teacher, I should say, he was really big on articulation. And and I remember from meeting him, he gave me this articulation exercise that he used for his college students. And so I took that sheet home and I worked on it nonstop, trying to apply the techniques and tools that he thought was best in articulation. And I remember my father one time saying to me, "Why do you keep playing that one piece over and over again?" And I'm like, well, because I want to study with this guy and I have to get my tonguing better, and this is his approach to it, so that when I went into the audition, it showed that I was invested in his method. So that's just probably one big thing about preparing for college auditions. But like some of the things, other things that I said earlier, um, playing for other people would apply as well.
Right. No, totally, totally, totally. So this is the big question that I ask everybody, because everybody does this differently, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the questions I ask for preparing string auditions and brass auditions, and there's tons of different answers. So I would love to hear your answer on this. What are the methods you may have learned that you can share with us as far as calming the nerves regarding the audition process, besides what you've already mentioned, which is great
Mm-hmm.
advice, playing for others, because you do kind of get that sense that you are being judged, by like an adjudicating board, when you go into an audition, whether that's at NOYO or whether that's at a university.
Mm-hmm. One of the first things I tell my students, be it if they're playing a recital or about to do an audition, is accept that you're going to be nervous. I think that's the first thing, because you spend a lot of energy in that moment stressing about the fact that you're nervous. And I've seen so many students walk into an audition with me and they go, "Oh, I'm nervous," which is totally fine. Um, so I would also say with that, what if you can accept that you're nervous, then you can do the job of doing. Um, you can begin to do the work uh, that is needed to get you through that audition. So you accept that you have these nerves. Now I can focus on the music. Okay. One of the things that stuck with me, or sayings that stuck with me, was from my time as a middle school um, teacher. I was directing the music for a musical that we were putting on. I was the head director, but I was in charge of the music. And the theater person that was working with the students, she took all the students to the stage, and she asked them to sit on the stage, and then she asked them to look up at the ceiling, and then she said, "I want you to count the light bulbs." And I watched the students, and they're all looking up and counting. And of course, these young middle school students were, very happy to tell her how many light bulbs they had actually counted. But that was not the point of her exercise. It was after she asked them to count the light bulbs, um, she said, "What did you notice?" And they were like, oh, they're 15, they're 12, or whatever, how many light bulbs? And she's like, no. Did you look out in the audience? Did you think about who was sitting there? And they were like, no, we were focused on the light bulbs. You were focused on counting the light bulbs. And I always tell my students, when you're nervous, accept that you're going to be nervous, but then begin to do the work of counting the light bulbs. When you sit in that chair, you think about the composition. Why did Mozart, what was Mozart saying in this music for you? What is the character of the music? Is there a theme behind this? And as you're actually playing the music, you're not thinking about, did I get that note right? Or here comes that next passage that I know is hard. Or, oh, pat yourself on the back because you actually got it right. You can't think about those things, but you have to do the work of creating the music and being immersed into that experience, bringing it to life. And I find that even when I get nervous, there are times when I'm in new situations that I am nervous, or if it's a big audition with a major orchestra, it's only natural. But I think I always try to bring myself to the humanity in the music and count those light bulbs that way.
No, that's great.
Another thing yeah, I have a few more points, but yeah, you were about to say something?
No, I was just saying, I think that's a really cool story about the light bulbs.
Yeah, it's really helped. And my good friend back in Virginia, I always share that with students, and it seems to help a little. But I always tell my students, you're going to be nervous. It's natural, but it's how you deal with the nerves is the key. I think also confidence through preparation, proper preparation. I mean, I have to admit, I've taken some auditions where, an orchestral audition, and I'm like, well, I could use probably a few more weeks on this list. And because I had that in my head, maybe I could have played well, but because I already had that in my head in the audition, I maybe didn't perform as well as I could. But, just do the best you can, and taking the confidence that you have from knowing that you've worked hard, and that generally helps. I also remind my students that the people in that panel, depending on the level of the organization, most of the time, they want you to succeed. Nobody wants to sit and listen to a bad audition. One, because they don't want you to feel bad, they don't want you to play bad, and they don't want to hear bad music. Right. So always know that most of the time, people are rooting for you, and there's no reason to go into the audition and feel that these people are out for my demise. Yeah, and then I kind of tied this into the counting the light bulbs, but stay centered, focus on yourself, and not being distracted by others. Personally, I'm extroverted. I like talking to people. And in those first days of auditioning, I was a victim of that personality. Oh, where are you from? Who do you study with? And you have to be careful, because some people will take advantage of that. They will, they'll go, oh, well, I went to this school and I'm with this teacher, and they might start, you just don't want to put yourself in the environment. I'm not saying going into an audition room and not be cordial, but if there's a space where there's a lot of people, find a corner where you can kind of start to get your mind on the process that you need when you go into that audition.
Almost like a focused meditation to kind of get yourself centered, right?
Yes,
Oh, awesome.
And breathing and visualization also help. Imagining yourself going through that audition.
Totally. And I'm so glad that you said that, because that is one thing that has been a connecting thread for every instrument that we've talked with on how to prepare for their instruments auditions, is they always say that these adjudicators are never out there to get you. They're on your side, they're rooting for you. And I hope that any NOYO kiddo who's watching this will, whether you're a clarinet player, a flute player, a cello player, or a trumpet player, or a percussionist, or whatever, will realize that everybody wants to see you do well. Nobody wants to be Simon Cowell, despite what's out there on TV. There's no people in V-neck t-shirts waiting at, just that they go, "You're awful,"
Right.
all want you to do well. So, and they
Yes,
are rooting
yes.
for you. So I'm so glad that you said that. So I want to jump to this question here. So how important is active listening? Because that's something I don't think that enough people talk about um, when talking about auditions. Like, should you listen to the song that you're about to, or many versions of the piece that you're about to go and audition for
Mhm.
and play for adjudicators and such?
Yes, yes. You have to, because you need to know the language. Depending on the ensemble level, um, uh, depending on that level of ensemble, I think it involves different things. So for younger students, again, I'll go back to what I'm doing now with a few of my students preparing for an audition. When they miss rest, or they miscount their rest, I say that adjudicator now knows that you weren't connected to the pulse and you weren't thinking about what your colleagues had in that moment. Because really, your consciousness in performing, it's not about, oh, I have a solo here, or I'm playing now and you're tuning everyone out. It's an immersive experience where you are actually feeding off the vibe from everyone else. You're trying to shape a product together. So if you're missing rest, for example, it shows that you're not doing that work. And so active listening is definitely important, um, to help train that ability that you can hear these sounds in your head even when you're by yourself. And I said a few seconds ago that it depends on the level of the ensemble. If you're preparing for a major orchestra, they may have their own style of doing a certain piece. They may have a certain tempo that the current music director likes. So the more you can know how that ensemble performs, the better it will help you in that audition process, because they're really looking for someone who can come in and be a team player, but and match what the orchestra is doing. So, for example, let's say if you're applying for a second clarinet job, if you don't know what the principal clarinetist sounds like, you may not know how you will blend with him or her. He may have a dark sound. You may have a super bright sound. And so let's say if you make it to an audition round where you actually have to play a duet or excerpts with the principal, the panel is going to listen for how well do you match our principal. So kind of knowing these things will give you a leg up in the audition process without you going blind into the audition. Um, so yeah, so do your research, listen to as many recordings of excerpts to just get an understanding of what the performance practice is. And again, this is maybe college level that I'm talking about, or music festivals while you're in college, or professional jobs. But knowing that what is the trend of the way we play excerpts. For example, um, there's recordings of one of my, I guess, clarinet forefathers, Daniel Bonnard, of him playing with orchestras like Philadelphia and Cleveland. The way he approached playing maybe the solo to one of the movements of Scheherazade is quite different than the way we approach it now. So if you're listening to one specific recording and you're trying to mimic that, that might not be the flavor or the taste of the ensemble that you are going to apply for.
No, I think that that's really good advice, because you need to stay current with the trends of wherever you're auditioning. So I would even say that that would probably go, or even, I guess, any given organization, whether it's a collegiate organization or whether it's a professional organization. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And to
Mm-hmm.
double up what you're saying, so it would be a good idea for not only for them to listen to recordings, but to also get a score, like what you were saying, so they know what's going on with those rests if they're working
Right.
on excerpts. So
Right.
like, and then it becomes, that's the joy of it. Like that's
Right.
really getting deep into the music. You have the score in front of you and you're listening, to these valid recordings that you
Right.
can use and cater and cut and trim to your for your audition, which is
Right.
yeah, no, that's great advice. That's highly detailed, but I think that's great advice. And the sooner you can do that, the better, I think, too.
Yeah.
Whether you're in
Yeah.
high
Because,
school getting for that, or if you're just starting college.
and I tell my older students that are in these youth orchestras, I say, if you know that you're doing a big piece, um, there's IMSLP. Um, some people will know what that is. You can go on and listen, look up a score and listen along. You might not be the best at reading a score, seeing all these lines, but you can. Let's say if you have a duet with the flute, you can kind of see what he or she has. Or if there's a woodwind feature within the piece, you can then know what your colleagues have, so that you're not just kind of being blastissimo all the time playing. You're being sensitive to what others have around you. And a lot of the NOYO Philharmonia students can tell you that when there's times that I've stopped the orchestra and I'll ask a section or a person, um, what's going on around you right now? Who has what? And sometimes they can answer. Good thing is, a lot of the times they do tell me, oh, second violins have the melody or something like that. But just training your ears, through visual stimulus, as well as just being open with your ears in an ensemble, a rehearsal really helps.
No, definitely. Well, Dr. Clark, we are starting to run out of time, so I want to get my last question to you, which is my favorite question to every presenter, right? Because
Hmm.
I love this question. If you could go back in time to that point in time where you just started taking the private lessons, I guess about 11th grade, since you shared that with me. So you're back there in your mind, right? Now, what is one, if you could, the current Dr. Clark, go back before you were a doctor, right? And go see yourself and go, I'm you from the future. This is what I need to tell you. This is one piece of advice you need to know about auditions, because not only have I successfully taken auditions now, I'm also an adjudicator and a teacher and an educator. So I can tell you other things. So here's the one piece of advice you need to know since you've just started taking lessons in the 11th grade. What one piece of advice would you give yourself?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give myself was to work harder on the things you thought were easy. Easy.
Ah,
Because all too often, we go into an audition, and when we make a mistake, it's not on the hardest things. It's something easy, something that you didn't even pay that much attention to, because you were focused on the runs, the 16th notes. And it could be as simple a rhythm. It could be, a wrong note that just pops up. And obviously, in auditioning, anything can happen. We're human, we make mistakes. But 9 times out of the 10, it's usually the things that I didn't put enough effort into because I thought that was the easiest thing. And I always tell my students, like, I might give them something that's lyrical to work on. And they go, oh, that piece is easy. And I'm like, actually, it's not. It's harder because you have less flash of fast notes. The the person is going to be listening even more to how well you're playing in tune, the beauty of your sound, your intonation. So never take for granted the easier things, and spend all your time on the hard stuff.
no, I think that's fantastic advice. That's the very first time I've heard that one, so I love that. Look at everything, even the things that you pretty sure you have, that those easy things.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Clark, thank you so much for taking your afternoon and talking with us here at NOYO. Let me just say that we love having you with our organization, and our kiddos, love having you, as their conductor. And we are going into some deeper levels of some music, which is
Yes.
wonderful. You know, I mean, you took on some great programming, last season, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get back to some normal rehearsals and we'll continue with some of the great programming that you are doing with the Philharmonia Orchestra. So
Well, thank you, Nathan. It was a pleasure to be here with you today.
awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Make sure you tune in next week for another edition of NOYO Knowledge. Check out our website, noyo.org, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe.